Good evening to all who are present with us today and who are watching this live stream right now. I would like to thank you all for joining in this opportunity and this session, which will be headed by a speaker, Ms. Kiran Selvarajan, who is a clinical psychologist and our CMC student counselor, who will be explaining to us about mental health awareness. So our event is called What's Up There. What's Up There is basically to tell everyone like what all do you feel in your mind. Like all of us, especially the students who are attending this meeting, we all nowadays suffer through anxiety and undergo breakups. Some are undergoing through certain addictions and use certain substances. We don't know if we are even depressed or not. So this session is just an insider and an eye opener so that we come to know about what all comes under the umbrella of mental health and why is it as important as physical health. And Ms. Kiran will help us in this session along with that. If anyone has any questions along the session, as well as we'll be giving time between sections between the whole session. So I would like everyone to just put up their questions in the video, in the YouTube stream live chat. And we will hand over the questions to Kiran ma'am. And in the end, I would like to thank everyone on behalf of Elijah, the president of OPSA, as well as because he is handling the uh, technical work of the whole live stream. And I'll be a host for the evening. And now I'll hand it over to Ms. Kiran.
Thanks, Advait. Thanks, Elijah. So, yeah, thank you for the intro and thank you for inviting me to speak for this session. I think all of you are familiar with Zoom or you're having classes for some time now. It feels a bit odd not to have interaction or not to see the students, but I hope that what I convey and what I share from this session, I hope it's a reminder or it's something new that you all keep in mind when you keep going through the next few weeks and years of your life. So I'll share my screen. Let me know if you're able to see it. Okay, so the topic that I was asked to speak on is mental health, and it's a very wide topic to cover, and there are a lot of aspects to consider when we look into mental health. So I'll be focusing on three. Okay, so there are three topics that I'll be covering, and after each of these topics, I will give you a slide for questions. So if any of you have questions on the topic that I covered, please send them in to Advait or put it in the comments box, and I'll be very happy to answer them to the best of my knowledge, and otherwise get back to you on those questions. So the topics that I will be covering are, the first one is what is mental health? And then common mental illnesses, and finally, how do you develop good mental well-being or mental health? And I'll also give you a few helplines and also who to approach when you have what problem. So these are the three areas that I will be focusing on, and please do ask questions as in when a topic is completed. I'll be happy to answer that. So when we first start with, we're looking at what is mental health. So before we look at mental health, we need to know what is health, correct? So according to WHO, health is a complete state of physical, mental, and social well-being. So this means that mental health is 1/3 of a definition of our complete sense of health. So if we say we are healthy individuals, we need to consider not only our physical things, which are very easy to know. So we can do blood tests, we can go and do scans. So it's very easy to know, it's very tangible to know how we are doing physically. But we need to consider physical health, mental health, and our social well-being. These three aspects constitute health, the definition of health according to WHO. So just like physical health, the same thing goes to mental health. we all have mental health, just as we all have physical health. Especially when we're young, we have it much better than when we're older. And sometimes mental health is just our overall sense of how we feel, of our overall well-being, our mental well-being. So it might include our cognitive, our behavioral and emotional well-being. So that is, when you think of cognition, it's the thoughts, so what we're thinking. When we think of behavioral, it's how we act, how we react. And emotional automatically is associated with our feelings. So these are the three components of mental health. And in each of these, obviously there's a wide list of things that we can think about, but it's cognitive, behavioral and emotional well-being. So when someone says you have good mental health, essentially they're looking at, okay, is this person does he have the coping skills to deal with a stressful situation? Is he aware of his own abilities, his strengths and weaknesses? Can he cope with normal stressors of life? And is he able to work productively and contribute to the community? So these are all typically what people think of when they say good mental health, because you know your thoughts, you know how to behave in situations, you know your emotions, and you're able to control those emotions in situations and be appropriate to those situations. But again, good mental health does not mean we do not have negative emotions. We are humans. We definitely have negative emotions. We have anger, we have frustration, we have fears, we have irritation, we have, worry. All of this is very normal. And if you don't have it, then you're superhuman. But all of us have it, and there's nothing wrong with having it, because we are human and we are meant to experience all these feelings, sadness. But knowing how to control those negative emotions in the situation. So for example, you may be angry at this particular situation and you might be irritated and wanting to throw something or maybe to shout at somebody. But a person who has good mental health will look at the situation, will take a different perspective and think, how do I act appropriately? Right? So you know how to cope even with those negative emotions. You know how to use those negative emotions in a good way. Doesn't mean you can't feel it. Doesn't mean you should not feel it. You definitely have those emotions. But knowing how to show it in an appropriate way, those are indicators of good mental health. So now I'm going to go into a mental health pyramid, which will help you understand. It's not a continuum, but you can definitely understand the different stages of going from mental health to maybe a mental disorder. So in this particular pyramid, as you can see, the lowest rung of it is no distress, no problem, everything is fine. So here you experience your negative emotions, but you know how to control those emotions. You go along with your life, and stresses are going to come, but you know how to handle it. The next rung of this pyramid is mental distress. So when we experience any stress, especially as college students or even young adults working in the workforce at the moment, you are going to have a lot of stresses in your environment, whether it's meeting deadlines, whether it's doing presentations, whether it's in your relationships with people. There are going to be small stresses that come up at different points in those particular situations. Mental distress is when you're experiencing that distress. It's not wrong. You can experience that. You may go through anxiety, you may go through a little worry, but once you come out at the other end, you know how to cope a little better. You know what to do differently. For example, you may have a presentation and you may not have prepared well in the beginning. You may have left it till the last moment and procrastinated, and therefore you're under some mental distress. But once you complete it, you recognize that, okay, maybe I could have done things differently. Maybe I could have planned a little better, ahead of time. I knew this about a month ago. I could have planned it better. I could have planned it a bit better. So you make changes to what you do so that you're able to avoid this mental distress. But any sort of stress, some amount of stress is good for all of us. It sort of motivates us to do it. You all, when you have exams, you know exactly how you feel. The last moment, the 2-3 days before your exam, you're able to stay up late. You're able to really absorb all your information. But about a week or maybe 2 weeks before the exam, you're still relaxing and thinking everything is fine. And you're taking it very slow, taking a lot of breaks. But just before, when the stress is a little bit high, just before the exams, you're able to do much more. So a little stress goes a long way. It actually is good for us. But there is a certain point when the stress does not stop, and it just aggravates our entire body, and it gives us an exhaustion feeling. So that's when it can become something that we need to seek some support for. Maybe we're not able to handle it. So after mental distress, which is for the normal things, maybe, like I mentioned, a presentation or some meeting with a friend or some relationship difficulties you're having, then you have mental health problems. So these are problems typically, when you've experienced grief in your family, among your loved ones. So someone close to you, a friend or maybe a loved one, has passed away for whatever reasons, or maybe you had a very difficult childhood. Maybe there was trauma in your childhood, and maybe you never got the opportunity to talk about it, or to have someone help you through those emotions. Or maybe you've had a difficult in your family unit, maybe your parents separated, or maybe you saw abuse or things like that. So those sort of situations, which are not the normal stressors where we can cope, where we can find time management skills or stress management skills, not those. These are a little bit more where they've affected us for some time, or a relationship that has broken, and something you invested in and you really wanted it to work, but somehow it did not work. Those things can really put us down and make us feel very low, and we may experience those feelings for quite some time. So then we have a little bit of a problem. It's not a distress. Distress can be handled a little easier without much help, but we may have a problem which we really have to look for some support. So we may need to approach somebody who will give us some skills or will help us through that process of going through our emotions. Then the final part of the pyramid is a mental disorder. So if we have not sought support during any of these times, so mostly during the mental health problems time, if we have not sought support, typically that whether it's a low mood can become a persistent low mood, or whether it's a little bit of anxiety or a little bit of fear of rejection, those sort of feelings that we have, they can really become exaggerated, and then they can become a mental disorder like depression or anxiety or social phobia, or the number of mental disorders that are that we do classify in our ICD or DSM. So I hope you've sort of understood this pyramid. It's very flexible. It's not so somebody who has a mental disorder, someone who is depressed, who's been diagnosed with clinical depression, could have, of course, mental health problems as well. I mean, could be going through a grief as well. While they have been clinically depressed, someone passes away or some relationship is broken, and they may be under some stress. So it could be, that there are more aspects in just one of you. You're not caught up in one part of the triangle, but you're in other parts as well of the pyramid. So now when we think of mental health, these are some of the things that you can look out for so I've told you mental health is your cognitive, your behavioral, your emotional well-being, where your thought, your actions, and your feelings are all in line and they're appropriate to the situation and you feel comfortable in it. So when we are going along well and we have coping mechanisms, remember, coping mechanisms are very important. Like I said, stress management, time management, knowing interpersonal skills, social skills, these are very important things. Sleep hygiene, these are very important skills for us to have at our, as a reservoir whenever we need it. But some things to look out for to say that maybe we are falling out of good mental health. Not that we are having a problem, but we're sort of falling away from good mental health and moving into maybe poorer mental health. So one of those things is changes in sleep and appetite. So when you notice yourself, so this is, exactly, it's not when you're really busy, or it's not that, you don't have time. When you know that, you're either overeating or not eating well, or when you know that you're not sleeping enough or you're sleeping too much. So these changes you can recognize. And remember, these signs that you look out for, you are the best person to see that. You can see for yourself. You know those changes, and you can, more than anybody else noticing it, you can do it yourself. So you're the first person to be able to identify that. So changes in sleep and appetite. For example, I'll give you an example, like especially, when we've gone through a breakup or a very, difficult time, I don't know whether it's common in boys, but I know in women, we may tend to go to food for, to make us feel happy at that moment, maybe there's a void, the person who we really find important, someone who's important to us is not in our life anymore. So we sort of substitute that void with something which makes us happy. But that something that makes us happy is only temporarily. It only satisfies us for that particular moment. So, we may start eating more, or we may just want to avoid everything around us and just sleep. And we feel, at least if we sleep it off, we don't have to have those thoughts. So changes in sleep and appetite, unstable moods. So, we can go from being easily irritable, shifting our moods, just because we're overworked and we're overwhelmed with emotion and we're not able to control the situation. So we just, we're just moving from one mood to the other. So small things can trigger us. Maybe, something fell down on the floor and we get triggered immediately. Even if it's like the smallest of things, those things can irritate us. So this is one of those signs that you can look out for, that maybe you're not relaxing enough, or maybe you're not spending enough time doing things you like, or maybe you're not introspecting on what's going on. Unstable moods, that's a very important thing. The next one is disconnected. So when we are disconnected from people who we love and people who love us, when we're not calling people, when we're, especially now, because we're all isolated, we're not able to meet people who we would normally meet. So we are disconnected in a way, but the circumstances have forced us to be disconnected. But if you are disconnected with family, when, you can make a phone call, or you can easily, FaceTime them, or you can even send a message, right? So when you notice that you are disconnected from people, and this is not your normal, for a person who's an introvert, again, listen to me. For a person who's an introvert, they may not necessarily go and meet people outside much, or they may not really chat much or talk much to people. They may not really want to pick up the phone when people are calling. Okay, not to say that each person to their own. They like their alone time. They get strength by being by themselves and reading books rather than being in a huge crowd. But if being disconnected is not your normal, if you are usually the type who's always interacting and being with people and calling and talking, and suddenly you are disconnecting yourself from people, then that's a sign to look out for. Another sign to look out for is, feeling down most of the time. So things that you used to find interest in before don't really interest you anymore. Maybe you like watching TV shows, or maybe you like playing video games, or maybe you enjoy going shopping, or maybe you enjoy cooking. So things that you were usually interested in don't really interest you anymore, and you just feel sort of low all the time. Nothing sort of excites you or makes you feel that good anymore, in comparison to what used to make you feel good. Okay, and the last sign to look out for is impaired cognitive functions. So when we think of cognitive functions, we think of all those, your reasoning, your memory, your recall, your concentration, all those things that may have been very sharp at one point, and suddenly you're not able to focus, you're not able to recall things which you usually would have. And sometimes we may think, oh my, I think I'm becoming older, I'm not able to remember things. Or, we may, make a joke of it. But actually, it may be that we are going through a lot of stress and we're feeling overwhelmed with stress, that our brain is not able to compartmentalize information as well as it did before. So even when we learn things, we may learn it, learn for an exam, we may vomit it out during our exam and then forget about it, because we've been under so much stress that we've not really retained that information. But this is a sign to look out for. So impaired cognitive functions. So now I'm done with the first section. So we covered mental health, what health is, what mental health is, and what are the different steps in the pyramid from being mentally having good mental health to going towards a mental disorder, and the signs that you can look out for. So these are just general signs. It doesn't mean it has to be different from your normal. Again, if your normal is, you don't sleep too well, but, your appetite is fine. Maybe you sleep only a few hours a night, or, you usually don't connect too much to people. It doesn't mean that, you are having poor mental health. But if any of these signs are evident in yourself, which is not the normal, then it's something that should raise a red flag. Okay. I will go into some common mental illnesses, specifically depression and anxiety, and then we'll go into a little bit more detail on how you can identify those particular symptoms in people or yourself. Okay. Okay, so does anybody have any questions? Advait, it's over to you.
So if anyone has any questions regarding the first section, they can send it on the live chat in the YouTube link. We will proceed to the next section in the next 30 seconds. Okay, so we'll start with the next section.
Okay.
Okay, so
All right. I hope you all will have some questions. Sometimes questions are easier ways to explain things, especially if you've experienced it in your own life or you've seen it in somebody you cared for. It will give more clarity. And as much as I can, I will try to bring that clarity to your questions. But again, if I don't have those questions, I will, if I don't have answers to these questions, I will get back to you also. Okay, I think there is one question. Just 1 minute. Okay, so the question is the question I will answer at the end of the second topic. The question is, are anxiety attacks normal at night during sleep? So now when I cover the second topic, I'll answer that question. Is that okay? Thank you for your question, whoever it was. Okay, so I'll answer that question once I go through common mental illnesses, where I will be talking about anxiety briefly, and I will answer that question at the end of the second topic that I'm going to be discussing. Okay, so now let's go to common mental illnesses. Like now there are so many I've put here. So you have anxiety disorders, you have psychotic disorders, you have mood disorders, personality disorders, eating disorders, substance use disorders. So all of these are common mental illnesses, but these are mental illnesses, but the ones I'm going to be specifically talking to you about are anxiety disorders and mood disorders, depression in particular. I will also cover suicide very briefly. And of course, any questions you can ask me at after this session, after this topic is covered. There are some more questions that are coming in. I will answer those questions at the end of this particular session after I talk about mental illnesses. Okay. Okay. So, the first thing now. Okay. So the first. There are questions coming in. I will look into these questions when they come into the relevant topic that they are going to be covered in. So I'll continue now with my first common mental illness, which I'll be covering. I want you all to go through a mental exercise with me. Okay, so we're going to be talking about depression, and it says that in India, approximately 46 million people suffer from depression. And that's a very large number, though in our population, it may only consist of maybe 5 or 6% of the population. It is a significant contribution to our overall health, because 46 million people are suffering from it. And these are only people who have reported it. There probably are quite a few people who have not spoken up about what they're going through. So this is only what we know, but from what we don't know, that might be much more. So let's go through a mental exercise. So the mental exercise is just maybe close your eyes and just go over the past month that you had, right? From, say, the month of June. So you're thinking about, the exciting. There may have been certain situations which caused a little bit of worry, anxiety, maybe not knowing when you're going to come back to college, when you're going to have exams, when you're going to be able to meet your friends. But at the same time, there may have been some really exciting moments where you maybe were learning something new or wanting to do something for so many years and never getting the time, and now you got the time to do it. So, you went through a mix of positive emotions and some negative emotions, right? I can think for myself, let me, I'll share something. So when during the past 1 month, I've had very nice positive emotions where, I'm working with my daughter, or working with students, or, it's been good to help people, or I've learned something. I've learned the ukulele, which has been a good thing for me. So these are positive emotions. Some negative emotions were, yes, it does get a bit tiring and frustrating when you're in lockdown and you don't have the typical help you usually have. So you have to do everything by yourself. So there's a bit of frustration, irritability. So these are normal emotions that we go through. And sometimes, you may want to just, cry, or you may want to, you feel very sad, you feel like crying, or you don't have any energy. Before you had a lot of energy, and now you don't have that energy because you're doing so many other things, or, so you do go through these positive emotions and negative emotions. So this feeling of being low or being sad, or going through a difficult time, especially during this lockdown, which has been really, a shock to all of us. It's difficult, and we all have gone through. I'm sure we all have experienced that feeling of low, just not being able to connect to people we really care about the way we normally would, or not being able to go out and do things, maybe go for a movie, maybe just, go for a walk without worrying if somebody is COVID-19 and doesn't know about it, asymptomatic. So there's a lot of fear, anxiety, and there are these emotions. So it is quite universal. It is okay to have those emotions. It's normal. So when can we say somebody is going through depression? So now we've just gone through depression, feeling low being a very universal feeling. But when can we say someone is actually going through a depression, or they are depressed and they've been significantly depressed for some time, and maybe they do require more support than, just finding people close by to them to just, help them get through it. So I hope you all can see this. The symptoms of depression, there are many symptoms, but the two main symptoms that need to exist is, one is you're feeling a persistent sadness or a depressed mood. So you've been feeling persistently sad, and this has to be for 2 weeks. Now this is clinical depression. So I'm giving you, in case you see people, your family members or friends or yourself feeling like this for 2 weeks persistently throughout those 2 weeks. So one is a persistent sad mood, and the other one is just losing interest in things which were pleasurable. So you don't, like I mentioned before, you don't play your video games, you don't watch TV shows, or you don't play music, or you don't care to talk to people. You've just lost interest in things which used to be interesting to you. So these are the two things that have to exist over a course of 2 weeks for you to first be able to identify if a person is feeling depressed. Apart from that, there are these other symptoms. So you have, feeling hopeless and helpless, having, body aches, somatic symptoms. You're having body aches, headaches, neck pains. Maybe you're, again, eating too much or not eating. Maybe you're not sleeping well enough, or you're sleeping too much. You're having cognitive difficulties in your cognition, so maybe poor memory, concentration, decision-making skills. All this is, again, different from your normal. And feeling excessively guilty, or you're very angry and irritable, or you're feeling worthless and you don't have much energy. So the two main symptoms you need to remember are feeling sad, persistently sad, and as well as losing interest in things which usually used to give you pleasure. These two things have to be there for a period of 2 weeks. On top of that, when we diagnose someone with depression, we can categorize them into mild, moderate, severe. So a person who has mild depression could have two other symptoms. So maybe they're not sleeping as well, and maybe they're not eating as well. So those two symptoms. And someone who has moderate depression may have 3 to 4 symptoms, and a person who has severe symptoms may have altogether 6 symptoms or more. So the two have to always be qualified. Apart from that, you add 2 more or 4 more or more than that. And a person who's really going through severe depression will have suicidal thoughts, will have suicidal ideation, feeling, I don't want to do this anymore, I can't do this anymore, what's the point? Is there any benefit of me being here? Is there any benefit to anybody? So those sort of thoughts may come for somebody who is severely depressed. So I just covered the symptoms. I'll show you how it works in when we look at the emotional, cognitive, and physical aspects, so you can get a better understanding. So these are the 3 areas. In emotional aspects, which is how we're feeling, you may have irritability, you may have inappropriate guilt, hopelessness, lack of enjoyment, sadness, anxiety. In your cognitive functions, you may have impaired ability to think, poor concentration, memory difficulties, indecisiveness. And in the physical, so the physical somatic things can be, headaches, stomach problems, not sleeping well, or reduced libido, fatigue, pain. Okay, so these are the 3 areas for you to remember, so you can categorize them better and have better access to them if you're seeing a friend who's suffering through it, or if you're going through it yourself. Again, when we think of depression, there are other things that you need to rule out. A person who is mildly depressed may just be feeling really sad for over 2 weeks, may not be very interested in activities, but they're able to sort of function quite normally. They're able to do things quite normally. They're not completely, their daily functioning is not completely impaired. But as you get to the more moderate and severe aspects of depression, your functioning is impaired, severely impaired. So you're not able to go about doing your regular things, even like taking a bath, brushing your teeth, getting out of bed. Those things can feel so difficult for someone else, and some people may not understand it. They'll be like, just get up and wash your face and start the day. Especially if you're at home, family members may not be able to understand it, because it's it's sort of Greek and Latin. Like, we went through it and we were fine. Why should it be so difficult for you? But the fact is, it can be, and just small things which you were able to do and you took for granted are not, you can't do it anymore. So when we think of depression, again, there are other things that you need to rule out. You need to rule out if there's any physical aspect of, you feeling tired, or you having, headaches, poor concentration. Maybe, your hormonal levels are not in the correct range. So, sort of ruling out physical problems which will explain, your other cognitive or physical or other reactions. So there is depression. Definitely, before getting diagnosed with depression, you need to look into the physical aspects which could also be contributing. So anemia, malnutrition, hypothyroidism, any changes from, maybe there is a substance use, and substance use can make us, when we're not on the substance, or when we're not experiencing that high, we may experience a low which we just can't, we can't deal with, and it just feels so difficult, and we feel low and depressed. So maybe, when we're off a substance, or when we're trying to get better, and, we're in that withdrawal state. So also, if you're on steroids, so the medical side effects, so steroids also can, when you suddenly stop steroids, that can also make you have some of these changes, which can look like depression, but not necessarily depression. When it comes to depression, there are other few things to consider. So, for example, breakup in relationships, they can really make us feel, like broken, right? We've invested in so much, especially if we've not got the sort of love and security that we sort of long for from our family. We look for it from other people, and we may be in a relationship which we really cherished, and it may be, I'm not necessarily saying a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, but it could also be, someone you really looked up to. And if a relationship breaks, we go through some grief, right? We go through some loss in our life. Similarly, if someone dies in our, in someone we know passes away, that causes us grief. So those things can make us feel depressed. Those things do not mean that we have depression. Each of these situations can cause us to feel emotionally completely broken. If we get the right support and we're able to slowly move on, it doesn't mean, after a breakup, within 1 month, 2 months, done, you're fine, you're back to normal, everything's fine. It doesn't work like that. For some people, it takes more time, especially people who have had difficult backgrounds or difficult relationships in the past. So it may take more time than others. So it doesn't mean someone who's going through that persistent sadness for a few days or weeks, or is just can't do anything, or doesn't feel like going to work or class, doesn't mean they're depressed, because it's a very particular situation that has caused them to feel like that. Just like if you lose a loved one, you will go through depression, but that's normal depression, that's grief, because you have to go through those feelings, that feeling of loss. The point where it becomes a mental illness is when after say 6 months, right? So you've gone through grief, maybe you're in denial, maybe you don't want to accept it, maybe you're just pushing it aside and not really facing up to those emotions. Maybe on the outside you're telling people, I'm fine, yeah, this has happened, but I'm moving on, I'm able to do things. So you're really not, because emotions are the things that need to be looked into, not the way we are behaving. So if we've not dealt with those emotions of grief or loss over maybe a job, a relationship, someone passing away, if we've not looked at that grief and that emotion, that intense emotion that we're feeling, then we're likely to experience that later on. So a healthy way of dealing with any sort of grief, especially breakups or again loss in a family or something, is to, when you are ready, to be able to talk about it. And you don't need, again, I will come to who you can approach for those things, but in a sense, you just need a support system. Sometimes you don't even need anybody to say anything. You just need someone to be there to vent. You don't need someone to take their side or your side. You don't need any of that. Sometimes you just need someone to share what you're going through confidentially. And just by sharing and venting, you automatically feel, you are healing inside. It'll take some time. It may not be something you get over so quickly, and each person to their own. But when you start the process of talking about it and not being in denial, automatically you're healing. So you're getting over that low mood and you're starting to do things a little bit better and get back to your normal. But when you don't deal with that grief and it goes for longer than 6 months, and you've lost somebody in your environment, someone, your community, and you've not dealt with that grief and you've just pushed it aside and continued going on. If you've not dealt with it, that can become depression, because you've not dealt with the grief of that particular significant event. But as such, when you go through an event, you can be expected to go through all these feelings, okay? But when you talk about it, you eventually overcome that, that overwhelming sense of emotion, negative emotion, and you're able to move on, okay? Okay, so the next mental illness that I'm talking about is anxiety. So again, anxiety is very common. Just like depression was about 46 million people, in India, anxiety is close, 45 million people have anxiety disorders. So when we think of anxiety disorders, there are many, so we don't just categorize it as one anxiety disorder. There are many different types. So there's social phobia, there's OCD, there's PTSD, there's panic disorder, there's separation anxiety in children. There's specific phobias. So all these are different types of anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder. So I've mentioned quite a few now. For example, if you have generalized anxiety disorder, it might be just a general overwhelming sense of anxiety where you're worrying constantly, where there's no reason to worry. It's just all the time a feeling of worry. Or when you have social phobia, you may be scared to go out and meet people or talk to people because you're scared of certain judgments, or you're scared of what they're going to say. So the world feels a bit scary for you. When you have OCD, when you have OCD, you've seen people, when they have obsessions, they're constantly thinking about things. They're constantly obsessed with, are things clean? Are things put in the right way? They're constantly ruminating. And then they have these compulsive behaviors that they have to do to make sure that that anxiety that they have is reduced. So OCD and panic disorders. Panic disorders is that sudden, intense, that fear and anxiety where, you're just out of your body. You don't know what's going on. And it just may be particular situations which cause you to panic, right? So normal anxiety we all have. Like I said, when we are stressed, when we have exams, we have a little bit of anxiety. It's fine. You use it to your strength. But sometimes anxiety, when it's intense and when it's overwhelming, that's when it can become a problem if we don't get help for it or some support. So I've mentioned general anxiety, social phobia. So common symptoms that you need to be looking at is the main thing is intense fear and worry. Okay, so you're intensely it's not proportion to the situation. So it's intense fear and worrying, constant worrying. So you'll find yourself overthinking about everything and every small thing, and you'll be relating one thing to the other, and you'll be thinking, oh, this happened in the past, it's going to happen again, and you'll just be ruminating about this. So intense fear and worrying. Other common symptoms are heart palpitations. These are physical symptoms: heart palpitations, sweating, shortness of breath, nausea, tense muscles, and then thought-wise ruminating about a particular situation or inability to concentrate. So all of these are part of anxiety. One thing is, even when you have an exam, or even when you have, a presentation, or even when you have something to submit, you may have these. I know, especially when people have exams, they suddenly have the urge to go to the bathroom, or, it's, you suddenly feel one nausea, or you just feel really anxious. And that can happen because that's a very particular situation where, you're worried about how you're going to perform, and maybe you've not studied well enough. So there's that sort of, fear of what's going to happen. But a little bit of stress, a little bit of anxiety is very normal for all of us, and it actually helps us do things a little differently. But when it's overwhelming and we can't control it, and nothing we say or nothing people say to say, calm down, or we go and wipe your face and go put water, if nothing is helping in that particular situation, then maybe that anxiety is just a little bit more than it should be. Okay. A lot of things could have caused us to have this anxiety. For example, maybe our upbringing, maybe we witnessed trauma, maybe we witnessed fighting in our family, maybe we have fear of, something like that happening in our life, or maybe we're carrying so much burden from our childhood up until our adulthood, and so we're experiencing that anxiety very heavily. And situations can be anxious, or maybe there was a traumatic incident in one open marketplace, and so automatically we associate that any marketplace to fear and anxiety that we experienced when we were younger. So all these things, especially when we're younger, all those experiences we have which could be negative, can continue till our adulthood and even later if we don't get help for it. So correct. So I've mentioned the different types of anxieties, generalized, social phobia, specific anxieties like, fear of spiders, or fear of lizards, or fear of heights, and sometimes we'll be like, of course, that's such a funny fear. Like, how can you have a fear of sour things? But for somebody, it is a fear. You understand? So it's easy for us to pass a judgment when we have no problem with it. Like, I have no problem with sour things, lime, but someone may really have a fear of it for whatever reason. Maybe they've experienced something in their childhood which has traumatized them, right? And so each person has their associations, and for each person, that fear and that anxiety is significant. Even if we can't understand it completely, we cannot express our, that we consider that nothing important. For each person, that anxiety is very significant. So that's a very important thing that you must remember. Okay. So I think when I mentioned anxiety, again, with anxiety disorders, sleep disturbances are also common. So because we're constantly thinking about a situation, or we're constantly worrying about something, we when we go to sleep, we don't sleep with our mind clear. We are constantly having thoughts of fears of something happening. So we might have sudden, we might wake up, we might have sleep terror. Like for children, they have sort of, sleep terrors. And that's very, that's a very common thing among children. But even among adults, when we have a lot of things going on in our head and fears, it can happen that we have a lot of sleep difficulties and we don't have restful sleep. We have, periods of sleep when we wake up, and then we again sleep for a short while. So we don't feel at rest at the end of the day, when we wake up in the morning. Okay, so I've mentioned anxiety and I've mentioned depression as the most common mental illnesses that you will find around, in the situations in the social situations that you are moving around, among college students, among young adults, maybe among your elderly family members. Depression is very common. Now, I just wanted to bring up suicide, because when we think of mental health, suicide is a very important topic to talk about. I will just be giving a brief into it, but statistics have shown that there are about 800,000 people who die of suicide every year in the world. That's a huge number. We're so worried about COVID-19, but there are so many people who are, having thoughts of suicide and who are feeling worthless and don't feel like existing, don't feel that their life is worth living, and feel that it's better for them to just die. COVID-19, yes, it's, there's a lot of fear around it because we don't know who has it. We've not yet got a vaccine for it. But the thing is, with suicide, there is help available. And if a person is, talking about suicide, or if a person is showing signs of, suicide, or any of those, that suicidal ideation, talking about it, maybe there's something worth looking into. Maybe, with the right sort of support, maybe they can come to a better place. Not that, definitely getting support and medication is going to help them completely. And it may take a very long time, and it may be a very long process that the person has to be willing to invest in. But sometimes, you feel all alone. When you're thinking about suicide, you feel all alone. You feel like there's no point. Nobody loves me, or I don't need to do this. So sometimes having a little support and having people who understand you around you can help you get out of that really low, worthless feeling that you may be having. And sometimes it may not, it's probably something that you've been feeling for a long time, but maybe other people don't feel about you. Maybe they feel that you're such a valuable person, and maybe they really consider you, amazing and full of worth and all that, but maybe you don't see it yourself, because maybe in your upbringing, maybe people have put you down. Maybe people have made you feel like you're not worth it. So there's a lot of, the way we think about situations, the way we think about ourselves, a lot of it is because of our upbringing, our childhood, and our environment. I'm not blaming parents. I'm saying it can be anything, any interaction in school, bullying with teachers, any sort of thing which was negative for us. It carries on with us, and we automatically, if we get reprimanded or if we go through a negative situation, we will go back to that situation when we were children and someone told us the exact same thing, and we will connect it, and we will feel bad, and we will not want to share it because we think, anyways, who's going to understand? But it is important, if you are feeling in any way, thinking about your life as not being important, it is important to, get the support that is appropriate for what you're going through. Okay, so some of the risk factors of suicide is there are societal risk factors. So when we say societal risk factors, we're talking about, difficulty accessing care, right? So you don't know who to go to. You don't know, you don't know who to approach for this, because, maybe it's difficult to access it. Or maybe there's a lot of stigma associated with mental health. And maybe, there's substance use, and, you've been feeling very low. So maybe there's a lot of stigma that makes you fear going and getting help. Like, what are people going to think, right? So you prefer not going and getting that help. Or maybe there's inappropriate media reporting. Maybe, I think we all are, we're all on social media, trying to put on a brave face and, posting the best pictures or best, positive quotes. But sometimes we don't always feel that. And maybe society and media especially makes us feel like we need to be relevant and do the right thing, though we may not be feeling it inside. So there may be a lot of societal risk factors, pressures. Community risk factors are like, maybe war, tsunamis, any conflicts in your community, poverty, any discrimination you have faced from your community. I think this is very common, all over the world. And in India, you have caste differences and things like that, which can really push a person to feel like nobody cares and, nobody wants me to mingle with them. Why should I even be? What is the point of this existence? So those sort of community risk factors can also be there. Apart from that, there can also be relationships. So maybe you don't have good relationships with people, like, your immediate family, or you don't have good social support. Maybe a relationship has broken down, which you really invested in. And, it just makes you feel completely broken and you just don't know how to move ahead. Maybe it makes you feel like, what's the point? If I don't have this, then I don't have anything, right? Because especially as young adults, we focus a lot of our energy on relationships, and our relationships, more than anything else, more than a lot of times. I'm not saying that our education, I'm not saying that, our careers, I'm not saying our family, I'm not saying any of that doesn't, add to our identity. But a lot of times, this age group, this 18 to 24, 25, that age group is, we want that relationship. We want something so important to hold on to. And we put everything into it. We invest everything we have. And when that breaks, we feel there's nothing else. We may have been really good students. We may have got, really, far in our education, in our goals, personal goals. But somehow when that one relationship which we put everything in has not gone according to our plan, we feel everything has just broken down. So our relationships, broken relationships, lack of social support, conflicts, those things can be risk factors towards a person thinking about ending their life. And the last thing is individual risk factors. So that is, if a person has attempted suicide before, there is a risk that they may contemplate it again. Or if a person is going through a mental illness, so if they've been diagnosed with depression or a personality disorder, or if they've, gone through some other PTSD, some anxiety, some trauma in their life, which, some abuse that they've not been able to share with anybody, those things can also be risk factors towards thinking about suicide. Or financial loss, any chronic pain in your body, physical factors, any family history of suicide. These are all individual risk factors that can make you have the thought of, okay, should I continue living like this, or is it better if I don't? So these are the risk factors that we can consider. Okay, time for questions. Okay, so there are a lot of questions that have come in. Let me go from the first one. Are anxiety attacks normal at night when we sleep? So, if there is something you are preoccupied with, you're preparing for something, it's a huge meeting, there's a lot of preparation, but there's also a little bit of fear about how it's going to go. You're going to be meeting people who are, in higher levels and things like that. Then you may have you may wake up in the night and you may be, sweating and, heart is beating, racing fast. You may be having, an excessive amount of anxiety. So that could happen. But if you are constantly, or at least consistently having anxiety attacks, maybe once a week, or twice a week, or once in 2 weeks, and it continues even when there's nothing really that you're thinking about which is causing you anxiety, specific anxiety, but you're just experiencing that, then it may not be a healthy thing to have in the night, because you're not sleeping well. And it could be, basically our symptoms mean there's something underlying behind, there's something else that's going on. So maybe there's some fear, maybe there's some, there's something you're worrying about, or there's something you're fearing for your life, or there's something that someone has told you which you've just been preoccupied with. Maybe that's been disturbing you for so long and you've not been able to talk to somebody about it. So definitely having recurrent anxiety attacks during the night when there is no specific reason to be worrying or no specific trigger is not normal. normal would be being able to sleep at least 5 to 6 hours a night, and feeling rested at the next morning. But obviously situations like I said, grief or anything which you've gone through which has been traumatic or like a trigger, that can make you have disturbances in your sleep. But recurrent anxiety attacks during sleep means that there's something that you're worrying about or you're preoccupied with, and you've not talked about it properly with anybody, or you've not got the right sort of support you need, even if you've spoken about it. Okay, so if you're going through sleep disorders, the second question is, how do we stop sudden sleep disorders? So I don't, if you can specify which sleep disorders it is, I can be more specific. But I think when it comes to sleep disorders, if it's, insomnia, or again, like sleep terrors, you're having anxiety attacks, things like that, definitely it would be, you can't just stop it. You need to, there's something else that, you need to talk to somebody about. It's not something that you can just decide, okay, today I'm just going to sleep. I'm going to have a good sleep hygiene. I'm going to wake up in the morning. I'm going to do all these activities. I'm not going to sleep during the night. I'm not going to sleep during the day. And in the night, I'm going to be so tired, I'm just going to fall asleep. So it doesn't work out like that. Maybe something you need to talk about, which is causing you to have these, whatever various sleep disorders you may be having. So the third question is, how do we ensure mental well-being during times of lockdown? So that question I'll get back at the end of our session, because I'll be talking about how do we maintain mental health, and that's also appropriate to this lockdown time. Okay, fourth question, is it better to seek out professional help for unaddressed emotional trauma? Yes. If you have emotional trauma, whatever it is, because again, trauma is not defined by only physical abuse, sexual abuse. It's not, it can be, for that person, trauma can be anything. So if you have experienced emotional trauma, yes, it is important to get professional help. But when you get that professional help, and I will go through people you can approach, professional help would either be a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist who would be able to understand that emotional trauma and could give you specific therapy for that. So it means it's a sort of, it's a long process. It's not going to end. Counseling typically, no, it may end in a few weeks. It's very short term. But if you are going through emotional trauma and it's been something from when you were younger, you definitely want somebody who's qualified. And also, you have to invest that many number of sessions. So maybe 15 to 20 sessions. And it's a slow process, because when emotions are concerned, it doesn't just go away like that. We have to get through those emotions. We have to start feeling okay with those emotions and being able to continue without having that affect us on a day-to-day basis. So yes, definitely professional help. If you've had some unaddressed emotional trauma in your past, in your childhood, wherever it is, definitely seek support. It is very important. And I can tell you one thing, if you don't seek support, it is going to keep coming up in different forms. And you are going to be losing sleep, and you are going to feel, not mentally well, because somehow it comes up in different ways, even if it's not, even if it's not clearly that, but it will pop up in different ways. So definitely, please do seek professional help for that. Okay, sleep talking related to the fifth question is sleep talking related to some kind of mental distress? Sleep talking, sleep talking is a lot to do with stress, right? So when we are feeling really stressed, or we've not had time to sleep, we've not had time to sort of just relax, and we're sort of overwhelmed with work and everything else that's going on, it's very common for people to sleep talk. It can be mental distress, because we're just really tired and we're just exhausted, and we carry on everything that's going on during our college days or our work, it just carries on through the night, and we're always thinking, did we do this right? And I have a lot of students, especially now interns in CMC, our medical students, who are telling me, their roommates are sleep talking, and it's so funny to hear them sleep talk, because they'll be, talking about the entire history of a patient, and they'll know everything. The other person would know everything about it, because it's just so much stress sometimes. You're just not getting time to relax. So you're constantly thinking about it, and you're constantly thinking, did I do this right? Did I not do this? Did I not inform somebody? Should I have done it differently? So sleep talking is typically associated with stress, and yes, it is some sort of mental distress, of course, but it's not a problem. It's just maybe maybe if you take a few days off, or you do something which is relaxing, you may be able to, you'll find that you're not sleep talking as much. But a lot of people do sleep talk, as long as it's not something that's, disturbing you, or you wake up and you're, crying or upset, and, those sort of, high, like intense emotions. It's quite okay. The sixth question is it possible that the person sitting next to us is suffering through depression and we will not be able to pick it up? Definitely. I think we all are very good at knowing how to portray ourselves, right? We have been pruned to know this is the way you appear, especially in our society in India. Our families have told us, okay, look like this, wear these things, don't show this emotion, be like, So we really know how to put on a very strong front and, make appearances and things like that. But it's very likely that someone who's quite fine to our naked eye is actually going through a lot. And this is where I will be talking about it in the next section, where, sometimes we may kid about, we may joke about, or we may say things which are slightly judgmental, but we're doing it in humor. But to somebody who appears to be quite fine and mentally well, may actually not be, and they may take it in a very hurtful way. And then automatically they stop communicating with other people, because they think everyone is going to think of them as, a crazy person or a mad person. So it is very likely that someone who appears quite well on the outside is actually going through something quite difficult inside and not expressing it, because we all have been coached to show ourselves in a particular way. And and I'm sure all of you know, in social media, right? And especially with celebrities, we hear, right? There's so many, the standards for them to maintain, there's so much pressure. So there are a lot of people who we see on the outside and it seems perfectly fine and doing well, but only after, when we hear about something very saddening, that we're shocked that, someone like that went through a difficult time. And it's interesting, because I saw, like, one of my, feeds on my phone said, it was talking about Robin Williams. I think it's been many years since his birthday or something is today. So, he was a comedian he was an actor, but he was a comedian, and, everyone laughed to his jokes, his movies. He was generally a feel-good sort of, the movies he made were feel-good. But this person who made everybody laugh and who spread, joy and laughter to everyone, finally committed suicide, because, nobody knew what he was going through, or maybe people knew, but not to the general public. So, he said something like, don't judge someone else, because you don't know what they're going through at that time. So, it's very important to keep that in mind. And that's a very good question. Thank you for that. Seventh question, how can we help our friends who recently had a breakup? Because that's the time they get more irritable, and whatever we say can trigger them. Okay. So a lot of times in supporting your friends and just supporting people, sometimes it's not about saying anything, because even if you say something negative about the person, so if, for example, if it's a girl, your friend is a girl and she's broken up, and she's talking to you and she's like, I don't know how he left me, or I'm so glad he's out of my life, and all these, whatever it is. As much as she's saying all of that, she's not necessarily feeling that much anger towards him. There's still a lot of love and care for this particular person. So if you say anything negative about that person, it's not going to make her feel much better necessarily. She may bring up her defenses, like, how can you say that about him? He's been so good to me. And so sometimes you just need to be there to allow them to talk about what they're going through, their emotions, accept what they're feeling. It's not easy. Maybe you've also gone through it. So you know that what they're feeling is very, very rational, and it's fine that they're feeling it. But maybe not adding too much unless they ask you, what should I do? Or how should I go about it? Unless they ask you for specific advice or they really, something like that, I think it's better not to give too much advice or not too much negative towards the girl or the boy, because that could bring up their defenses and it could make them more irritable. Okay, and it might come like things might be like, you're my friend, why are you telling me all this, and you're supposed to be supporting me, but actually you may not have done anything much, but it's just that they are upset, and so when they are upset, they're not thinking about what you're saying, they're just thinking, that's how they're feeling. So maybe it's best to just support this, be there for them, and if they ask you for your advice or if they ask you for any sort of any physical support, like come with me here or this, you do that. You be there for them, because maybe especially in those moments when you typically meet your boyfriend or your girlfriend, those moments especially you'll be missing them. If it's every evening at 6 o'clock you meet them, every evening at 6 o'clock you're going to be really upset, you're going to be really depressed and feeling low and all of that. So those moments, maybe you can say, can we go for a walk, or should we just go and do something? You can ask them, and if they don't feel like, fine, leave it. But give them time to get over that intense emotion before you feel like you can contribute anything to make them feel really better. Okay. And the other thing is, like you said, whatever we can say can trigger them. And the fact is, sometimes they just don't want to hear any advice. They just want to, they just want to sulk, and we all do. We just want to sulk. We just want to have somebody there to make us feel like, we have friends around, but we don't necessarily want any of their advice, because, for us, it's grief, and we feel like, how could this happen? And nobody can make it better. So unless they ask for some help or some advice, just try and just be around to, make them feel like, we're here for you. And if you need us, we're here. And even if you don't want us now, we're always here, and you can always call us whenever you want. So just let them feel that support. Yeah. Ninth question. To a person who's undergoing depression, should we console them and talk about it? Or should we distract them and not remind them of their difficulty? Okay. So is it somebody who's going through clinical depression, who's been diagnosed with it? Or is it just someone who's going through a low mood for some particular reason and feeling sad? If you can, because in depression, it's good to encourage people to engage in activities. So if someone is feeling depressed or low in general, not clinically depressed, but just feeling, just feeling really out of it and doesn't feel like doing anything, it's very good to have a routine. It's very good to keep them engaged in activities. Even if they don't feel like doing it, it's very good to keep them engaged in activities, because automatically that makes them feel like, okay, something is going on, and they're not ruminating on those thoughts, but they're able to do other things. So it's good to keep them active, and it's good to engage them rather than distract. You're engaging them in activities which they otherwise may not do, and they may just isolate themselves. So that is good. But during that time, as you are engaging them, like, you're playing basketball with them, or you're doing something, you're going for a walk, you're doing something with them, they automatically may start talking about what they're going through. But, not always do people feel comfortable to talk about what they're going through when they're sort of pressurized, or when they're, sort of, okay, what's going on? Why are you feeling like this? That's not going to help anyone open up. So maybe it's just like, doing normal things. And at some point, when they feel that there's no judgment, or when they feel comfortable, they will start talking about it. But we cannot force anyone to talk about anything unless they are comfortable to do it. Okay. Okay, you mentioned manic symptoms. Is there any possibility that mild manic symptoms can be mistaken as irritability, just that the person is angry? So, yes, there can be, yes, it could be that people are mistaking it as irritability, but for manic symptoms, for mania to be diagnosed, for it to be a criteria, for it to be diagnosed, there has to be the criteria has to be fulfilled. So irritability may just be one aspect of it. There has to be other things: elevation in mood, impulsivity. The rate of speech is faster than normal, or a lot of ideas, not able to concentrate, a lot of distractions, things that are not sleeping well because they're always wanting to be awake. So there have to be other symptoms which fall into the criteria for a manic, for a person with mania to be diagnosed, for it to be manic symptoms. Otherwise, if it's just irritability and anger and nothing else, then no, it cannot be mania at that time. Okay. No, zoning out is zoning out indicative of underlying mental problem? Not necessarily. Zoning out can just be being distracted or just really tired. It can be any of those things. I've not spoken about like other things. Like I've not spoken about other mental illnesses, but there are some mental illnesses that do have sort of like a staring gaze, zoning out sort of one of those aspects which you will notice in people. But general zoning out might be you're just really tired, or you're just really bored, or you're just you're not interested. It doesn't necessarily have to be a mental problem. Okay, there are a lot of questions. When feeling very anxious or sad, what can people do? Okay, so good question. When feeling very anxious or sad, what can a person do if they don't feel like talking about it so much? So one thing to do, a very good thing to do, especially if you're not the type of person who wants to talk to new people and establish a rapport and things like that, writing things down is very good. So journaling is a very good thing that will help you somehow vent that emotion. Even if it's not person to person, it still feels like some burden is off you when you write it down. So if you can have a journal, it's a very good way to if you're feeling anxious or sad, it's a very good way to let out that emotion without necessarily talking about it. But after you do journal it, having one person to occasionally talk to just to know how you're doing, for them to know how you're doing, or someone you confide in, it would be good to talk to them. But otherwise, journaling is a very good way to like a self, without having to really involve too many people in that process. Okay, 14th question. Okay, so 14th question. If we're not able to sleep because of the fear of lizards and cockroaches, what can we do for those people? Okay, so if it's like if it's a specific phobia where you're really, really fearful of those situations, of those lizards and cockroaches, and they really keep you up at night, then there is a therapy. I think the systematic desensitization. Maybe some of you have heard about it. So systematic desensitization, basically it pairs relaxation with a hierarchy of anxiety-provoking situations. So this again has to be done in a professional setup, and it's better to do it in a professional setup and then to have those skills for you to do it yourself. Because when you are doing it in a professional setup, you are supported, and whenever you face that anxiety, someone is there to guide you through that anxiety. But if it is a specific phobia, there is some way to help that, and definitely a clinical psychologist would be able to help you with that. Okay, so medicines, I will talk about medicine, but medicines is not the only way for someone to feel better, whether it's bipolar, borderline, or any of that. Medicines are important for some people to help them to be able to think about situations better, because when you're very extremely depressed, sometimes it's very difficult to have proper thought processes. So medication can help you come to a sense of calm and make you think more rationally. And then after that, you need to have psychotherapy or specific therapy. So maybe it's CBT, or maybe for borderline anxiety, borderline personality disorder, it's DBT, bipolar disorder again. So medicine is not the solution. It may aid for some people to help them, be able to think about situations and to do homeworks and things like that. But definitely medicine has to be along with therapy, psychotherapy. And this can be done with a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist. But if you are going for medication, only a psychiatrist can prescribe medication because they have studied medicine and then done psychiatry. And there are a lot of therapies available for different disorders. So for depression and anxiety, we have CBT, there's interpersonal relationship therapy, there is dialectical behavior therapy, that DBT, which is for borderline personality disorders. Of course, for OCD, for people who have obsessive compulsive disorder personalities, you have the exposure response treatment, so that therapy, EPT, I think. So ERP. So there are various different therapies which can be used, which only professional, either clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist can do. Usually counselors do not have the skill set to do that, and they've not trained or they've not worked with other people who've had this and and known how to go about it. So, but there are very specific therapies for that have worked for different mental illnesses. Okay, so there's one question about, I've been experiencing some explicitly violent and repulsive thoughts, and I'm unable to understand why they are recurrent. Please help. So for this, I would recommend that you go and meet somebody in person. I think a clinical psychologist, a psychologist would be enough. You don't need to go to a psychiatrist for any medication. But I'm not sure a counselor would be able to help you with this, because maybe there is something traumatic or something disturbing you from your past, which will take a longer period of time to work through. So definitely a clinical psychologist would be someone you can approach for this particular thing. I will give out numbers. If you are from CMC, I'll ask Advait to give you my numbers so that we can schedule appointments. But otherwise, yes, yeah. Okay, so sometimes people will throw judgment, or you're feeling anxious, or you're taking tension, what's a big deal, and you may not feel it yourself. If you're not feeling any changes in your body, in your physical symptoms, like your heart is not racing, or you're not experiencing anything from the normal, then probably people are just throwing out words. Because remember, people can throw a lot of judgment at us for whatever reasons. They're very easy at pointing fingers than looking at them within themselves. So please don't, if you don't feel it that you are being anxious, if you feel that it's quite normal and you're able to function quite normally, then, unless it's someone who's important to you, who you feel really understands you, and who can really see the difference between someone who is behaving, without anxiety and someone who is behaving anxiously. Otherwise, if you feel fine, you don't need to take what other people are always saying, because people will always want to give advice or throw out their judgment, even if we don't ask for it. How can a person feel depressed by being near peers and other people? Peer pressure can be very harmful, especially at a younger age, when you're in your school years and college years, of course. It can be very harmful, because you may be going against something you don't want to do. Maybe it's something with substance use, maybe it's with pornography, maybe it's something that causes a lot of guilt, or it's for you it is morally wrong. For the other person it may be fine, but for you it may not be. It may cause a lot of guilt. Yes, that sort of guilt can lead you to feel, guilt. Obviously, guilt can make you feel, doubt. You have low self-esteem. You feel like, what am I doing? I've broken trust with everybody, and just feeling that you've not been able to hold your willpower and things like that. So it can really cause, it can be really harmful, especially if it's dangerous sort of peer pressure. Okay. So very important, yes, of course, patient caregivers can go through caregiver burden, and it's very important for them to get support, because taking care of a loved one, either if the person is going through a terminal illness or whether the person is going through something, a terminal illness, an acute illness, and, is in a very bad situation, a person caring for them, they may feel like nobody else is there. They're the only people who can help them, and it's a lot of burden for them. So definitely, you don't have to, again, you don't have to say, don't worry, it will be all right. You can always, especially in CMC, if you're in a hospital setup, there are chaplains, there are people who can support caregivers, right? Because chaplains come around to help our patients, but also they can support our caregivers as well. Because if a caregiver is not mentally strong, because the caregiver is just exhausted after giving and giving and giving, and taking care of this person, they won't be able to be efficient, or they won't be able to do as well as they have been doing in caring for that patient. So definitely, you don't have to say, don't worry, it'll be all right. Just say, you can say, I understand that it's really difficult, and, that caring for another person is emotionally, physically draining. There are people you can talk to, and you can always, get a chaplain or someone. Especially in CMC, we have that resource, so you can use that resource for them. No, so is being scared of darkness or having scary dreams problems of mental health? So it might be anxiety, right? So it's not, if you're scared of darkness or having scary dreams, you might be having some anxiety. It might be good to talk about that anxiety. What are your dreams? What are your dreams typical? What are the recurrent dreams that you're having? Are they the same sort of themes? When you switch off the lights, what are the things that you're feeling? What are your thoughts? Why are you scared of the dark, right? Is it because you're scared that, you're alone, or no one's going to be around? Or are you scared that something's going to happen when it's dark? So, it's good to just get support. Even a counselor can help with that, because it's not a mental, it's not a big problem, but it's definitely something that is causing anxiety, which you can talk to a counselor about. How do I overcome the behavior of not being? Okay, so if you have difficulty mingling and communicating with people quickly, maybe there are some social skills that you're lacking, which you may need to work on. And again, a counselor can help you with that. They can help you develop those social skills, which will give you the sort of confidence to mingle with other people. Maybe also maybe you need to learn certain relaxation techniques, so that when you are in a situation where you're supposed to interact, you're able to relax yourself and not allow your negative thoughts to overwhelm you. So you're able to stay at a calm state. So this is something that definitely a counselor can help you with. And you can overcome that behavior. Not all of us are. I'm quite an introvert, and I really like my space, and I'm not out there sort of, shouting from the top of the buildings and things like that. But and sometimes it can be, when you have to go to a big party or like a function and you have to meet people and talk to people, it can be a bit anxiety provoking, because, you don't know what you're going to say necessarily, or you don't know whether what you're going to say is going to be okay. And, you have these thoughts, it's fine, because maybe you're more of an introvert than extrovert, or maybe you have a social anxiety, around being with people. But it's not something that can't be overcome, because as long as you're able to know what thoughts are coming in and be able to control the thoughts and the negative association you give with the thoughts, you're able to overcome that anxiety very easily. How can you guys to stay with the roommate over staying alone? The question is, how often would you advise people to stay with a roommate over staying alone? Often people ruminate into thoughts when they're staying alone. Okay. If you're comfortable to have another person in your room, a roommate, and and it does not cause you any discomfort, and it does not invade on your personal space, then there's no harm having a roommate. If you feel like it's, you don't have your personal space, you need your personal space, especially if you're an introvert, you may just want to be alone rather than have to share it with a roommate, and you have the option to have a single room. Yes, you go for that. But in terms of ruminating, there must be something else that's causing you to ruminate. So it's not necessarily your roommate that's allowing you to, the roommate is distracting you from your thoughts, but there must be something else that's, upsetting you, which is making you ruminate. So it would be good for you to talk to somebody just to get your thoughts into place and to know which thoughts are important for you to recognize and to give importance to, and which are not, and which you don't need to really think about and ruminate about. So just in terms of overthinking and ruminating, that you can talk to a counselor about. But if you don't have any problem, with other people in your room, and you're happy with it, and it doesn't feel like they're invading your space, then no problem. Have a roommate. That's good. Okay, so what about changes and cope with it? If they're having recurrent sudden mood changes, like low to high, and it's like a consistent sort of mood change, then maybe it's something that you can ask a person to go, and if there's no particular situation that's causing them to have that mood change, right? So just suddenly, like a small trigger makes them go up and down, then it may be good for them to go and talk to, I think it would be good for them to go talk to a clinical psychologist who will be able to see whether there is something more that they are going through than just what appears to be mood changes. How do you... Okay. Okay. Is feeling emotionless a symptom of depression? Sometimes you feel blah. That feeling like nothing. There's no anger, sadness, nothing. There's just it feels empty. And if you've isolated yourself for a long time, and you've gone through those feelings of feeling alone and nobody loves me and all of that, and then you don't you just don't feel anything at all for any situation which should warrant emotion. For example, someone's birthday, and you're happy for them and you want to celebrate with them, or someone's done really well and someone close to you has done something really well, you want to congratulate them, that warrants a reaction from you. Or someone has lost a loved one, or someone close to you has, something has happened, or they're ill, and that warrants some grief or some sadness. Unless if you're in those situations and those emotions don't come up, then maybe you're going through something yourself where you've sort of numbed yourself, right? So we can numb ourselves we can be numb to every feeling. And that can mean that we are going through something ourselves, and we're not able to feel anything, or we're just out of touch with what's going on because, we've just become numb to it. So that could mean, it doesn't necessarily mean depression, because like I mentioned, there are other things that need to be satisfied to be depressed, but you could be just going through something which you need to talk to somebody about, which would be good for you to talk to somebody about, if you're aware of it and you feel that it's, this doesn't seem right, and I shouldn't be feeling absolutely numb or void of emotions when everyone, when there are situations where you would otherwise feel happy or sad or angry or whatever. So yeah, I would think that you can talk to someone about that. So the last question is it okay to keep ourselves away from some social situations? For example, like I can attend a marriage with my friends, but not go to a marriage where I'm going to meet relatives. So we live in such a, like in India, we live in, everyone's sort of looking out who's come and who's not come. And especially in marriages, if a family comes and one person does, why didn't they come? And they talk bad about them. They think that, they're upset with them. So it's unfortunate that we have to make all these social appearances, but also it somewhat is important for us to do, because we may not necessarily like it. Maybe our relatives are going to, maybe they're thinking, oh, this person, look at this person, or they're going to ask us, what are you doing now? Or maybe there's something we don't want them to ask and we're not comfortable. But sometimes, because we live in a society in India, our culture is like that, where families get together and all. Sometimes, as much as you can, it would be good for you to go. But if you're absolutely not feeling up to it, and you just feel like each time you go for a wedding, your relatives are going to ask you some question and you're going to feel really upset about it, then it's worth just telling your parents how it is, like just talking to your family about it and saying, each time I go, this is how I feel. Can I be, can I not go for that? And I'm sure your parents will understand, because a lot of times we avoid some weddings and all, especially women, especially if our parents have been talking about marriage, we're always thinking, oh no, like, what are they going to be, which auntie is going to be looking out and seeing how, so it causes a lot of anxiety for no reason, and we just don't feel comfortable with it. So, you can talk to your parents and tell them, like, I don't want to come. But if it's somebody really close to you, some family members who, have, mean a lot to your family, and, it's important for you to go and show your support for them, then I think definitely you should, pull yourself up and go for that. But otherwise, if it's not someone who's very important to you, and just some wedding invitation, then I'm sure your parents will understand and not force you. Okay, so that was the last question, and I think Advait is going to say something in the meantime. I hope I've answered most of your questions. If there's anything, you can let me know later, or you can let Advait know, or he'll give you my number. You can always contact me if you are from CMC. But otherwise, I hope I've covered most of the questions.
Yes, ma'am. So thanks a lot for the questions. There are a lot of questions, and we like the response from everyone. Thanks a lot for that. And then we'll move on to our last session, that is the third session. If anyone has any other questions, they can just feel free, and if they want to keep their identity as anonymous, they can just go to the Google form and post their questions, and we'll address it to ma'am. And in the end, we'll be giving a feedback form that if that's filled by everyone or by all our listeners, it would be very good for us to keep that in mind for the next time. Okay, ma'am, we'll proceed with the third session.
Okay, so the third topic is it's much smaller, and I hope it will, you're all awake and, you're going to be alert for it. I'm just going to be mentioning about how to maintain your mental health. That includes a question about during lockdown, how can we keep ourselves mentally well, and just some helpline numbers, and that's about it. So maintaining mental health, right? So there are a few things that you should be doing to keep your mental health well, okay? So the first, like I put it all in pictures, I hope you can, I'll explain each of them. So the first one is having a routine. So as much as, now lockdown especially, we don't, especially when we don't have classes in the morning, we can sleep late, wake up late, have our lunch, our breakfast late or a brunch, and, there's no particular schedule in mind. That can really take us, that can really make us feel, that things are not going too well. Like we're just becoming lazy, or we're just not feeling very well, or we're not, feeling rested and things like that. So maintaining a good routine is important, right from the morning till the evening. So you decide, even when you're on holiday, if you decide I'm going to wake up at 8 o'clock or 8:30 or 9 or whatever time, you do it consistently. And that involves everything else that happens through the day, and also in the night, what time you want to sleep. So maintaining a routine is very important, okay? The next thing is staying connected. So definitely stay connected. If you are the type that loves to keep in touch, stay connected to your friends, your family members, FaceTime, WhatsApp, phone calls, whatever works for you, Snapchat, whatever it is, stay connected, because a lot of times, especially during lockdown time, we're so isolated from everybody. So it's very normal that, when we are alone, we can have a lot of negative emotions and thoughts, a lot of negative thoughts like, oh yeah, no one's messaging me, or no one's calling me. And we always expect them to do it sometimes more than we want to, because we want to see whether they care about us enough. But, those sort of thoughts will only make us feel much more lonely, much more isolated. So I think all of you should try to stay connected in whatever way you can, even if it's in your WhatsApp groups. Just, check up on people, you care about, check up on people who may want you to check up on them. It's okay. Sometimes we just have to let go of that ego of who's messaging first or who's calling first. And, if we have a thought and we're concerned about somebody, stay connected. Okay. The other way of maintaining good mental health is doing things which are calming for yourself. So whether it's praying, spending time with God, whether it's meditating, whether it's just thinking about all the things you can be grateful for. Because I think, especially during this time, we can think of all the negative around us. Everyone's falling sick and we're so scared and we're like putting masks and we're like washing 10 times and, all these anxieties that we have. And we're always, and maybe a little bit more irritable than before because we can't go out, we can't do the things we normally would want to do. So we can really tend to focus on the negative things. But an important thing to focus on are those positive things and the things that you can really be thankful for. Whether it's just being safe in your home and just being having internet connection, or just having family who are there to support you, having 3 meals a day, or having friends who are there who you can talk to. Just having that, having a grateful heart in that sense, because there is so much, and especially when you read the newspaper, also there's so much negative. So it's very easy to be just get into that negative way of thinking. But it's very important that we consciously stay grateful for the things that we do have. So I mentioned meditation, prayer, things like that. Okay, so the next one is engaging in hobbies. As much as you are restricted from going outside, there are a lot of things that you can pick up when you're at home. So whether it's, you love to draw, you love to, learn a new instrument, that you have an instrument that you can learn, or you love to, record music, or, you want to, do some gardening, or, things like that. There are a lot of hobbies that you can pick up, which maybe you never had an interest in before, but now you can find time to do it. So, engaging in hobbies, and, maybe you can't go for walks, maybe you can't go exercising, maybe you can't, go to, a music concert or movie or something like that. But there are things that you can find in your home. And just as you are feeling sort of restricted, everybody else is being restricted. So find ways in your house to make, to engage yourself in things that make you happy. So it's a little bit about self-discovery as well, to find out what more is interesting for you and not just limiting yourself to what you used to do, Okay, and then in that, also in this maintaining mental health is allow yourself in a day, allow yourself to have time to worry. So if it's like a 5-minute or 10-minute window to worry, it's fine. We can all worry, but like assign that time for you to worry, assign that time for you to feel all those, what's not been going on and how things are not going according to your plan and how exams are not, no one's telling us about exams and no e-passes are being, you can have that time to worry, but be very specific that you only give that much time, because there's no point just constantly thinking about it through the day, because you thinking about it does not make anything really happen. It only makes you more distressed and more upset. So allow that time to worry, because that's a normal emotion, and obviously we are in uncertain times, but just restrict it to that particular time. Okay, so how can you, as a person who's not trained in supportive therapy or psychology, anything like that, how can you as students or individuals help? So one is a very important thing that you need to do is you have to have a shift in your perspective. Okay, so all of us have been through difficulties in our life, and all of us have, some of us have overcome it, some of us are still going through it. We need to be able to see each person and their difficulties as non-judgmentally as possible. Because if we throw judgment, then we are doing ourselves injustice as well. Because when we have a problem, we will not feel comfortable to go and talk to anybody. So you need to be able to check your own prejudice. What are your prejudices? Because it's very easy to say physical illness. Okay, someone has diabetes, someone has hypertension. Those are like, we don't really consider it a big deal. We don't, even, even people who have diabetes when they're young, they're injecting themselves and be like, okay, fine, that's that's fine. We don't really think too bad about it. But when it comes to mental illness, somehow there's so much stigma around it. And the fact is, none of us is really free of any mental distress. We all go through different, various levels of it and at different times. And so if we have a judgment to other people, then we won't feel like going and approaching people when we are going through something, because we think everybody else has that stigma towards us. So just like any disease, physical disease, like I mentioned in the beginning, health is 1/3 physical well-being, 1/3 mental well-being, and 1/3 social well-being. So just like you would go if you had a physical problem, if you have something which is upsetting you emotionally, psychologically, maybe there's some self-esteem issues, some those sort of feelings that you're having, you should approach someone without feeling like people are going to look at me in a wrong way. And that's a problem in our society in India. I think abroad, a lot of people, like even therapists, pastors, everybody goes for therapy. Like I have relatives who, a pastor relative in the US, and she goes for therapy regularly because it is part of their protocol. They have to go for it, because how can someone who's supporting someone else not, go through their own emotions? Which means we all can experience negative emotions constantly, and none of us is safe or immune from it. So there should not be a stigma in going for, even if it's just, I'm having some difficulty managing my time, or I'm having some difficulty with this particular relationship or this friendship, and I don't know what to do about it. It doesn't matter. If you have a friend you can go and who you feel supports you well, good. But if you feel like you want to talk to somebody confidentially, definitely a counselor is very good to talk to. And most colleges have a counselor. A clinical psychologist, if you have issues which are a little bit more deep-seated and require a little bit more time to get through those issues. And a psychiatrist if you require medication. Because I can tell you, if you don't get it at an early stage, it doesn't go away. Ignoring it doesn't mean it's gone. It just means you found a way to cope, but it doesn't mean your coping is necessarily good. It will come up in different ways. So the way you can help is first change your perspective of how you look at mental illness, anything related to mental well-being. So if a person is going through a rough time, sometimes it's very easy, like I've mentioned, check your own language. It's very easy to say, hey, you mad fellow, or you're so crazy. What are you saying? Like, this is such a stupid thing. Like those sort of words, though it's done playfully and though in friends you can understand each other, it's good. Sometimes for the person who's hearing it, as much as they're like, haha, yeah, okay, it might really, like the question said, you may not know what they're really going through. And it may really affect them, and it may make them close themselves up towards sharing with you. So you can really check your language, and check if you're being sensitive, and check if when you're saying something, you're showing judgment, or whether you're being open and non-judgmental. Okay. The next, so things that you should not do. Don't pressure anyone to share. If someone doesn't want to share, you have to give them their space, because if you pressure them, they're going to become irritable, and it's going to be of no use. Again, don't think that you have to solve their problem. Okay, you cannot have the solutions to all problems. All you can do is just be there for them. Try to avoid negative terms, like I mentioned. Like, oh, you're good for nothing, or just saying negative terms which make it feel like what they're going through is nothing. And why are you going through that? It's not a big deal. For that person, it might be a big deal. We can never negate what they're going through. We should always, consider what they're going through as important for them. That makes them feel open to talk to you. Don't judge, and don't say things like, just get over it. What's a big deal? Okay. Even for you, if you think it's not a big deal, that's fine. But if someone is going through it, if you say get over it, or it's not a big deal, that's not going to make them open up. It's just going to close them, right? And then finally, the person they want to talk to, they can't talk to, because they feel that person is not going to, be willing to understand and going to be judgmental. The things you can do is you can be a good listener. Like I said, you can't always have solutions. You probably won't have solutions, but you can be a good listener and hear them out and make them feel that, yeah, you are there to hear them out. And if you feel that you're not able to support them enough because there are skills that are needed to support them better, you can give information about where to get that support they need. And also, even if they're not willing to share something at that moment, you can always say that, I'm always here, and whenever you need support, I'm here, and you can call me, or whatever, but I'm here, and you don't have to force him to talk to you then and there. And the last two slides, when to go, whom to go to, and when. So a counselor, so I'm typically talking about in India. So we have counselors, many counselors, and counselors are trained to deal with daily, everyday problems, right? So it can, again, I've mentioned this quite a few times, so it might be stress management, time management, anger management, better sleep hygiene, just talking about issues, friendship, things that are going in relationships, or even grief. Even if you're going through, someone passed away or some relationship is broken, counselors are very good to, they listen to you, they can assist you to, find those emotions and, work on those emotions better. Counselors are very good for that. Now, if you're having, and most colleges have counselors, or like a psychologist. Now, if you're having more mental health problems where it's leaning towards maybe you're being more depressed, or there's anxiety, panic attacks, things which are not are going a little bit beyond what is normal mental distress. A clinical psychologist would have the therapeutic skills to help you with that. So a clinical psychologist is trained in different therapeutic approaches, unlike counselors who may not have the training with different populations. So a clinical psychologist also can help with diagnosing a person with maybe depression or anxiety or any other psychosis. They are trained to diagnose, and they're trained to use assessments to diagnose as well. Now, a psychiatrist, you would need to approach a psychiatrist if, for example, a counselor or a clinical psychologist says that I think you need medication. So at that point, only a psychiatrist can prescribe medications. But typically, a psychiatrist and a clinical psychologist, they work together, because psychiatrists can also diagnose. They also have the therapeutic skills. They know a lot of therapies, and also they can give medication. But if you're not in need of medication, then a clinical psychologist would be somebody who can help you with those, deep-seated emotional issues or things like that. And a counselor can help you with everyday issues and grief and, burdens and things like that you're facing, stressors, workplace burden, things like that. Counselors can help you with that as well. I hope, and you can ask questions as well. The helplines, please do take it down. So if you're part of CMC and you need to talk to somebody, I'll give, Advait has my duty number, which you can take down, and you can call me at any time. Now we're not really meeting anybody, but you can give me a call, and if I'm busy, I'll get back to you and give you a time to speak. But so that's if you're part of CMC. Otherwise, there are these other helplines. I've only put a few. So I call. It's a service run by Tata Institute of Social Sciences, TIS, and iCall is run by trained professionals. So they can give you, if you're having any emotional difficulties, if you're having any, other issues that you're facing, you can always call iCall. Their timings are put it up. Sneha is specifically a suicide helpline, but also if you're going through emotions, you're having suicidal thoughts, or you're feeling depressed, or you're having some ideation, Sneha, that's a helpline that you can also call. That's also there daily. And then the other one is the Vandravella Foundation, and that's also, they have a lot of counselors. They're not clinical psychologists or psychiatrists, but they are counselors, they're trained counselors who can help you with any emotional problem, and any mental distress you're going through, anything you just want to talk to somebody about. Again, if you're in CMC or you're part of CMC, I'll ask Advait to give you my number, so you can even contact me. Yeah. Okay, so that's the end of the session. Advait, over to you.
We'll be discussing a few more questions right now.
Yeah.
Then we'll...
Okay, how do you deal with pressure to be successful in studies when you're young? Okay, so a lot of this pressure is from parents, I expect. So a lot of these pressures are from parents when you're young, especially when you're in school, and they have a lot of expectations for you. Remember, the thing is, I think parents also will need a lot of counseling, because many times parents don't realize the harm that they can be doing for their child's life, because they put so much pressures to study well, to do activities, to be an all-rounder. So a lot of it is you need to take what you feel is good for you. So you are studying, you're putting in your time, you're putting in your effort. Your parents mean well. Remember, they mean well. They want you to succeed. They want you to do well. All meant well. Sometimes it may not come across as well, because they may not appreciate even the good things that you are able to do. Maybe they just, you've not done well enough according to their expectations. So they just, don't consider it and don't appreciate. And that can be really hurtful, because you put in a lot of effort and a lot of time. But one thing is, in your mind, you need to know that you are putting your best effort, because a lot of times we can be lazy, we can procrastinate, and we can just be doing just the minimal effort to make sure that we get through it. If you feel that you're putting in the effort that you can, and you feel you're doing as best as you can, then I think you have to allow yourself to give yourself positive motivation, because you're the only one who will give you positive self-talk. So if it's, I'm doing this well, everything, I'm putting in the effort, and I know my parents expect so much of me, and I'm trying my best, this is what I can do. And if you need support, even in schools, school counselors, they do talk to parents. They will, if you feel that your parents are being their expectations are not appropriate, then definitely that might require a school counselor to get involved, and to help your parents see that you are putting in effort and you are doing your best. And maybe it's not up to their expectations, but it is, they should not put that much pressure on you. So that's some way that you can get involved, get someone else to support as well. I'm feeling sad and down, but I can't find the reason. How can I help myself? Okay. I think it's a very good exercise that you all can do, is to self-reflect, to introspect on things that have happened in your life, things that that you're holding on to, things that are upsetting you, just to have some time to think about it, because there has to be some reason for you to be feeling sad or low. And it may not be a particular incident, or it may be something, or maybe your thoughts, maybe you're attributing negative thoughts to a particular thing, or maybe someone has said something that you never really considered, but then you had a negative thought about it, and automatically you start feeling, oh, is what they're saying correct? And am I like that? Am I useless? So, so there has to be something in your thought process which is making you feel sad and low. In CBT, in the therapy that we used to treat people who have depression, CBT, we work on cognitions, and the way we think about situations make us feel certain things, our emotions, and make us behave in certain ways. So that's something that, it's good to introspect on what are those thoughts which are coming into your head, which are allowing you to feel sad. What does it mean when what does it mean when someone would rather have physical pain than to have to go through mental or emotional pain when they've experienced? Okay, so again, like physical illness, something physical is tangible, right? So sometimes we don't have control of our emotions. We're not able to cope with it. We don't know what's going on in our psyche. We have low self-esteem, insecurities. So sometimes it's easier to, what we can control is the pain we give ourselves, whether it's self-harm. We can control that within our hands. This emotional thing is so difficult to control. So that physical pain is something which is tangible, right? So we can someone can shout at us, someone can hurt us, abuse us, and we feel like, okay, it's done, someone has done something. But when we have to start looking into the emotional pain, when we have to start working through the layers of pain that we've experienced, that takes a lot more struggle, because it's not evident. Nobody knows about it except for us. So it's a lot, it feels like we're going to be completely tired and exhausted by the end of it. So physical pain, sometimes it just gets it over with, whatever it is. And a lot of people who do self-harm, it's something that you can control, you're so upset, anxious, and it's just like, how do I deal with this emotion? And it's like, okay, if I cut myself, I feel better. Okay, fine. The pain that emotional pain has gone out through physical pain, but it doesn't really solve the problem. It doesn't make that emotional pain go away. So that's, I guess, what people say, when it's easier to go through that physical pain than the emotional pain, which they can't really, they can't really piece it out. They have to work on it layer by layer. Okay, was depressed and occasionally suicidal a couple of years back, but now I'm trying to help a friend in the same situation. Any suggestions? Okay, so since you went through it, you will know what helped you and what support you needed to get through that difficult time. Usually a person who's going through depression and having suicidal ideation, they need a lot of support. They need someone just to be there for them. And if you're having suicidal ideation, definitely sometimes we think, okay, it's okay, we'll get over it. But sometimes most times it's best to get professional help for it. You can be there, you can support them, you can share your experience that I also went through it, and it's so difficult, because then they understand that you know what they're going through and you're not just an outsider. But at the same time, you can also encourage them to go get the appropriate help, because one problem with supporting someone who's having suicidal thoughts and depression is that sometimes if somebody does go ahead and attempt or take their own life, you can be left with a lot of guilt yourself and feeling like you didn't do enough. So sometimes it's better to go and share your experience and share that you understand, but also give them the information to go and get professional help, so that you don't have to be guilty that you didn't do enough. God forbid anything does happen. Okay, sorry. Okay, yeah. All right. And the last question is, childhood plays a major role in behavior in our country, where adolescents are not much open to their parents and vice versa. What are the alternatives to it, along with working child and parent relationships? So, as I said, I think it's so important. I feel that parents really need a lot of, sessions to help them understand how their behavior can affect their children and all of that, because a lot of times first time parents, they really don't know what they're doing, and they may be making all the mistakes. And I can tell you for a fact that with my daughter, I always felt, I know a lot of psychology and I've learned it and I've done it in detail, but sometimes with that frustration or anything, we may show an emotion which is not appropriate, because we are human. You can't be too hard on yourself. But I feel that parents who have no clue of the sort of effects that they could be causing their child in the future, which can be really severe, from personality disorders, which are really difficult to, it's really difficult, it's a personality disorder. So you have to live with it your life. But, a lot of things which just start with the family upbringing. So I feel like parents do need a lot of support, and there needs to be a lot of workshops and places where parents can go and talk, especially in schools or in organizations. I feel they really do need that. Yeah, that's the one thing, because I've felt in many of the students I've spoken to, we need, it's fine to talk to the student, but a lot of times the problem is not with the student. A lot of times it's in the sort of negative emotions the family is showing, or it's in the way they're dealing with the student, which causes the student to feel really anxious. So a lot of times it's just sort of working with both of them together. So I definitely feel, there needs to be a better gap between, parent and child, because I tried in myself, I tried with my child as well, that I'm going to, I talk about feelings, emotions, let her know that negative emotions are normal. And my husband keeps saying, why are you talking to a child like this? But, we've learned so much that we feel like, we need to allow that open communication, because if we don't allow open communication, the child, when the child grows up, they're going to feel like they can't talk to anybody, or what they're going to say is not important, or they don't have a voice. So definitely, yeah, that question is very good. Definitely, we need to work on that gap that exists, in our cultural sort of norms of parents knowing everything and children don't talk back and don't say anything. So, yeah. Okay, over to you, Advait.
Okay, so thanks a lot, ma'am, for the really a beautiful session, a wonderful session. We had a lot of questions. Thanks a lot for everyone who was listening to the whole live stream, and thanks a lot. A special thanks to the people who asked questions. And I hope your questions have been answered. And people who want to communicate further with ma'am who are from CMC can contact me for the number, and the rest of the people from outside of CMC can just note down the helpline numbers in the last slide. And we'll be putting that in the chat box. I would like if people can fill up the feedback form, as well as the video. The whole live stream will be on YouTube. The whole video will be on YouTube after this live stream is over. It will be uploaded on YouTube. So people who want to see this, or your friends, you can spread the word and they can watch this in the end. And in the end, I would like to thank everyone from on the behalf of OPSA, from Elijah's side and my side. And I would like to tell all the OPSItes that we'll meet them next week in the fellowship. Till then, signing off. Thanks a lot.
Bye.